everyone, my name is Teigan Goldsmith and I'm the archivist at the Ottawa Jewish Archives. Welcome to the Ottawa Jewish Community Centre. Today I'll be giving you a tour of the archives and showing you all of the great ongoing projects we are currently working on. The archives was established in 1969 and it strives to maintain the collective memory of the Jewish community of Ottawa through its objectives to acquire, preserve, and make accessible its holdings, which document the history, growth, and development of the Jewish community within Ottawa and the National Capital Region. That's just a really winded way of saying that we collect items that pertain to Jewish Ottawa. Our collection tells the story of community life in Ottawa starting in the 1890s up until the present day. The archives hasn't always been here. Its first home was on Chapel Street in Ottawa's first Jewish Community Centre, or JCC. The archives was established in 1969 by a few passionate community members, including our founder and first archivist, Mrs. Shirley Berman. Shirley recognized that Ottawa's Jewish history wasn't being preserved and decided to do something about it. She and the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society began collecting documents, photos, artifacts, and anything else they could find to ensure Jewish history was saved. The archives remained in the Chapel Street JCC for almost 30 years. During this time, it amalgamated with the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society, working as one organization intent on preserving history. In 2001, the Jewish Federation of Ottawa took responsibility for the archives, and we've been with them ever since. Although the Archives and the Historical Society are now separate organizations, the two work very closely together and we receive a great deal of support from them. In the late 1990s, the community began to outgrow the first JCC and it was decided that a new one would be built here. When the Ottawa Jewish Community Centre opened in 1998, it came with a special purpose-built room intended for the archives. We were given an office, a research/processing room, and of course the vault where all the history is stored. The archives is located on the top floor of the JCC inside the Greenberg family's library. Welcome to the archives. This is the research room. This room is designed to function as a dual space for both myself as well as researchers. The primary purpose of this room is to house researchers. When someone reaches out asking to view certain materials, this is where they work. I pull any information related to the topic they're looking into, and then they're free to go through everything at their own pace. This room also functions as a workspace for myself. Anytime I need to do something archival that requires me to spread out a little bit, I work in here. This table gets used the most for creating displays, performing research for patrons, and anything else that I might need. The research room also stores a portion of our collection. This area here is our reference/multimedia collection. The top shelves consist of reference materials, which is anything that doesn't belong to a particular font. It contains marriage records, death records, and bar/bat mitzvah records. These are fantastic resources for anyone doing family history. Aside from the obvious information you gain from these sort of documents, it can also help connect the dots on a lot of missing information. Let's take a marriage record, for example. Obviously, it tells us that Jane and John were married on a certain day, but it can also tell us the bride's birth date, the groom's parents' names, and where both of them were born. When building a family tree, these small hints can make a huge difference in terms of tracking down information. Our reference section is an invaluable resource that we are so happy to have. Below reference is our multimedia collection, which for the most part is made up of audio cassettes. These audio cassettes are one of our current ongoing projects, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. These cassettes are another invaluable resource because they contain interviews with community members, telling their life story, as well as a collection of rabbinic recordings. Our bottom shelf also includes our negatives collection. This is one of the largest ongoing projects we have right now, which again, I'll touch on a little later. Finally, this entire section contains every copy of the Ottawa Jewish Bulletin ever printed. The Bulletin was Ottawa's longest standing Jewish newspaper. It was established in 1939 and ran for over 80 years. Sadly, on January 1st, 2021, the Bulletin was closed permanently due to the pandemic. Although the physical Bulletin is closed, it still lives on in a different capacity, now known as the Jewish e-Bulletin, which is available online. Having every single copy of the Bulletin is an incredible resource. What documents a community's movement and history better than a newspaper? Having every copy is wonderful, but having every copy digitized and available online is even better. Back in 2016, the Archives was able to digitize all the newspapers up until 2011, and they are currently available online through the Internet Archive. They are keyword searchable and a really great resource for researchers. Since the Bulletin is closed down, we've been able to complete the collection and will hopefully be digitizing the remaining 10 years worth of newspapers soon. The last thing I'll point out in the research room is our reference computer. This computer can be used by the public to access our database, the bulletin, or the Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive. The Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive is an online database containing more than 54,000 eyewitness testimonies to the Holocaust or Shoah. The archives is one of 136 viewing sites worldwide that allow people to access the entire collection. A portion of the collection is available online for viewing, but if you'd like to access the entire collection, you will have to access at a viewing site such as ourselves. We are very proud to say that we have contributed 3 recordings to this database. When we are open, this is one of our most common access requests. Welcome to the Collections Vault. This room is off limits to the general public as it's where we house the majority of our collection. The archives has more than 400 fonts pertaining to the Jewish community here in Ottawa. For anyone who may not know, a font is a word specific to archival collections. To put it simply, it's a box or a folder relating to a particular collection of information. For example, if I were to donate my family records to the archives, it would be called the Goldsmith family font. It would contain records pertaining to my family's history and can be anything from photographs to letters to records to a detailed family tree. A font is a special way of organizing information. In a museum or a library, when an item is brought in, it's given an individual number and then housed within a certain area corresponding to that number. Archives do the same thing, but we take it a step farther. Fonts are broken down into detailed categories that are intended to make finding materials easier. If we use the Goldsmith family font as an example, we can see that it contains items that pertain to my family. But within that font, there are subcategories, also known as series. A series can be something like a family tree. This is usually a folder which houses all the family trees donated to that collection that relate to my family. The series can be broken down even further into files, which contain more specific information. I could organize the family trees into sides of the family. So that would be a file that just relates to the Goldsmith side of my family. That can then be broken down one final time into an item category, which would be one single item within that file. To some, this might seem like overkill, but the purpose is to make sure that everything is as easily accessible as possible for both myself and for researchers. These fonts can be as small as a folder or as large as multiple boxes. Currently, our largest font consists of 98 boxes. The archives font are broken down into 5 categories: businesses, congregations, education, individuals/families, and organizations. This first row in the vault consists of businesses, congregations, and smaller individual fonts. The second row is education, larger individual font, and organizations. The third row is solely organizations, and the final row holds remaining organizations, the photograph collection, and our artifact collection. This is the photograph collection. It is one of our largest ongoing projects. We have thousands of photographs from all different fonts, with a large portion of them not digitized or in my database. Photographs are one of my favorite parts about working in heritage because the picture tells a story without using words. You can get a date based on an object in a photo, styles of hair, or events, people, and so on. The photograph collection starts from this shelf here and continues all the way to the back wall. This portion here is, for the most part, what is currently digitized and in proper housing. These shelves here contain what still needs to be done. I was very lucky to have an intern from Fleming College from January until the end of April who helped with this project. Marika basically spent 4 months going through and assessing the condition of our collection and creating a game plan going forward with how to properly deal with the photographs over the next several years. They are labeled based on priority and what's inside. Over the next several years, we will be working towards digitizing and rehousing this enormous collection. This wall houses the oversized collection of artifacts. Traditionally, archives really only collect 2D items. However, if an item is significant enough and we have the space for it, we will consider taking some 3D items. I also know that Shirley, our founder, had a dream of one day creating a Jewish museum, so there tends to be a couple of 3D items here and there. Although this dream hasn't yet happened, I do like to try and keep that tradition going whenever I can. The oversized section houses items from the different fonts that cannot fit in their assigned boxes. This section can house anything from large print photographs to clothing. I have a large number of textile boxes that have wedding dresses, judicial robes, scout uniforms, and so on. Our largest artifact collection would actually be the trophy section. We have a ton of trophies. As weird as it is to have close to 60 trophies kicking around back here, they can be used as a research tool. Trophies carry dates and names as well as an affiliated sports team. From a trophy alone, you can pinpoint somebody in time. I'm planning on creating a display in the JCC, hopefully for when we're able to reopen again, where I will showcase all of the different trophies we have. Over here we have our wrapped photographs and paintings collection. As per archive policy, we cannot remove frames and glass unless they are causing damage or harm to the prints, so those that are donated in this state remain that way. These ones are all beautifully labeled by a past archivist, and right beside this is the rare book collection, the majority of which were all donated by the same donor. As I mentioned earlier, the Archives has a number of ongoing projects that we're focused on at the moment. The first is the digitization of our audio cassette collection. This is the collection that is housed in the research room underneath the reference section. This project began in January of this year when we were given funding by the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society to hire a part-time intern. Over the past 5 months, Grace has been chipping away at not just converting these cassettes, but also taking notes from my database to make finding relevant information easier. It's important for these cassettes to be digitized because the lifespan of a tape isn't very long. These have been sitting here for 20 to 30 years, so it's time to ensure that they are in a state that ensures longevity of life. The particular collection she is digitizing is that of the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, the Historical Society and the Archives began an oral histories project where they interviewed individuals in the community and asked them to tell their and their families' life stories. These interviews covered a wide range of topics such as growing up in Ottawa, immigration, schools, businesses, marriage, death, and so on. These are an absolutely invaluable resource because we are getting the history straight from the source. The interviews are people in their own words telling their own stories and how they remember them. It's an incredible thing to have, and I'm so grateful to have the funding to be able to do this project. We're currently 40% of the way done, and I'm very excited to say that the Historical Society has decided to renew the position for another 6 months, which should bring the project to completion. I'm hoping that once these are digitized and accessible online, I can begin what I'm calling the next generation of interviews. I'd like to see this project continued with new interviews from current community members. Another project that's being worked on, but from a distance, is the restoration of our photographs. We currently have a wonderful volunteer working with us remotely from up north who's been digitally restoring many of our photographs. When photographs are donated to the Archives, the first thing that we do is check the condition of them. Anything that will not cause harm to other items in the collection and that we don't already have are usually accepted. This sometimes means that photographs have tears, scrapes, marks, smudges, or discoloration. It's important to have these photos for reference, but if they're needed for print or for exhibition, their condition can limit our ability to use them. That's where Emily comes in. She is an amazing Photoshop worker and uses her skills to adjust the lighting, fix tears, and remove pen and pencil marks. These kinds of restorations help to eliminate imperfections and enhance the quality of the photos. To be clear, these are by no means replacing the originals. They are simply restored and kept for when we may need them. This has been a really unique project in a sense that it's something that we can do entirely remotely. The pandemic has presented a lot of challenges for the Archives because the majority of the work needs to be done in person and items can't leave the Archives. But this is something that we can do. I do have to place credit where credit is due. Our volunteer Emily was the one who approached me about this volunteer opportunity, and I am so glad she did. It's a brilliant idea and it has made such an impact on our collection. The final ongoing project I'm going to tell you about is the digitization and rehousing of our photographic negatives. This is the Archive's newest project. My conservation intern Marika wrote her final paper on our photographic and photographic negative collections and outlined best practices and suggestions for going forward. Since we have a number of nitrate and acetate negatives, they are starting to deteriorate and they're not in the best housing. My plan is to spend the next 6 months working to digitize, rehouse, and find proper storage for these negatives. This is really an exciting project because many of these photos I personally haven't seen before, and many are not in the collection. The first batch of negatives I came across were from the opening of the very first JCC in Ottawa. I only have a handful of photos of this momentous event, so finding an entire folder filled with photos of this is so exciting. Since there are a variety of negative sizes, I've had to get a little creative with my digitization methods. Those that cannot be scanned using my scanner are photographed using a DSLR camera and a light table. I had originally planned on working on the project by myself, but I have been given the gift of help once again by the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society. They've decided to fund a second intern for the Archives starting in September, who will be dedicated to working on this project. It will include digitizing, cataloging, and rehousing our beautiful photographic negatives. Thank you all so much for joining me on this tour of the Archives. I hope you enjoyed going through our collection and hearing about all the big things we've got going on. I hope you will all come and visit once we're able to reopen.